Good evening, and welcome to tonight's virtual town hall on housing resources. Thank you for joining us. I'm Springfield City Councilor Jesse Letterman. As our community continues to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, I hope that you, your families, and neighbors are staying safe and well. I want to start by saying thank you to our entire community for all of your efforts to flatten the curve and protect our most vulnerable neighbors from the COVID-19 pandemic. I know that the measures made necessary by the pandemic have not been easy, but since the onset of the coronavirus in March, we've witnessed this community come together in so many ways. From the essential workers and first responders who have continued to put their lives on the line to treat patients, respond to emergencies, keep our supply chains running, and deliver mail to ensure the continuity of our electoral democracy, to the volunteers that have stepped forward to provide food, coordinate mutual aid, and donate personal protective equipment. And to all of you who have had to adapt your industries, businesses, and jobs in ways that a year ago would have seemed unimaginable. There's no doubt in my mind that Springfield remains challenging times. And while we must continue to practice physical social distancing, let us also keep our family, friends, and neighbors close in our hearts. We may be physically apart, but we must be united and together in our response to get through this. During this time, our methods of communication and action may have changed, but our advocacy and service has not. Throughout the pandemic, it's been my priority to share as much information as possible with our community through social media, traditional media, and virtual town hall panels like these. At the beginning of this pandemic, advocates and elected officials, including members of the City Council and panelists today, urged the signing of an eviction and foreclosure moratorium to protect homeowners, tenants, and businesses from eviction during the pandemic. Until now, the Massachusetts eviction and foreclosure moratorium was the strongest in the nation. However, last month, the governor announced that he would not be extending the moratorium. We know that as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, many individuals, families, and businesses continue to face economic hardship. We also know that without assistance, it is estimated that 100,000 could face eviction or foreclosure across the state, including many here in our own community. We also recognize that many commercial property owners, especially local and small-scale landlords, are facing financial challenges as well. Because of this, we've assembled here a panel of housing and community experts to discuss the available financial resources for tenants, homeowners, and landlords, as well as the protections that do exist for those facing eviction or foreclosure. I hope that the information shared tonight will be helpful to members of our community, and I encourage those watching to share this information and the names of these organizations with your friends, family, and neighbors who may be facing housing insecurity, and encourage them to reach out for help. Our first panelist is Keith Ferry, Executive Director of Wayfinders. Wayfinders is our designated regional administrative agency for many of the state housing assistance programs. So at this time, we will welcome Keith. And Keith, we'd love it if you could introduce yourself and share a little bit about what Wayfinders does.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate being able to talk about the organization and most importantly, talk about what we're doing in this time of great need for so many people in Springfield and throughout the region. Wayfinders is our regional housing organization. Our focus is on providing critical housing support services to people in need who are renters, people in need who are facing or experiencing homelessness, people in need who are homeowners who are facing foreclosure or other issues with their homes. We also develop and manage affordable housing throughout the region. So we have a perspective, a multi-pronged perspective on the current crisis and the needs and issues facing our communities today. What I wanted to focus on, and I wanted to share a few slides with everybody as I kind of talk through some of the resources. So I'm going to share my screen now. I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial assistance programs that we have available during now at Wayfinders. And we've had some of these programs prior to the pandemic. But one of the key things that occurred when Governor Baker's eviction moratorium ended is that he launched an eviction diversion initiative. And so the programs that I'm talking about were greatly expanded during that period of time with lots of resources, and continue to be expanded to try to meet the needs and the growing concern about people being displaced from their housing. Among the programs that we operate at Wayfinders, there's a residential assistance for families in transition, otherwise known as RAFT, an emergency rental and mortgage assistance program. Additionally, we've been very pleased to be able to work with Mayor Sarno and his administration on a Springfield rent and mortgage assistance program. In addition to that, I wanted to say that to understand these programs, I'll go through in just a moment to give a little bit more detail, but the purpose of them is to help our clients with overdue rent, mortgages, overdue mortgage payments, utilities, security deposits, and if they need to move to a new housing situation that is more affordable, we can help with that as well. The programs overall, in terms of the household sizes, it varies. It can be a household size of 1, it can be a household size of 9 or 10. That's not a limitation on the program. The one limitation is on income. So they go up to households that earn up to 80% of area median income. To give you a sense of what that number would mean for a family of 4, 80% is at $68,300 for a family of 4. For an individual, it's $47,850. So there are many families who certainly will find themselves eligible for these programs, given the numbers. And again, it varies depending on household size. We have one single application that you can find on our website that is, you can totally complete on our website as a whole online process if you'd like to choose that. I'll talk a little bit more about how to apply in a minute. And that one single application, Wayfinders will then determine which program best will meet your needs for financial assistance. So we don't want you to worry about choosing which way to go. We'll be able to figure that out based upon what the information you provide to us. The maximum benefit level for the RAFT program in particular is $10,000 per household. Some of the other programs have lower thresholds in the $4,000 or $5,000 per household, but RAFT was recently expanded to be up to $10,000. And there's some requirements to go along with that, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. As I mentioned, the application can be completed online. One of the silver linings, if you will, from the pandemic is that we've all had to adapt. And one of the ways that we've adapted is gone from paper applications to virtual applications and a complete online process. We also recognize that many people may not have access to online tools or may not have the skills to be able to do that as well. So folks can call us at 413-233-1600. During regular business hours, someone will pick that up and pick up your call and help you through the application. If you need to come in and you need assistance actually filling out the application and walking through it, we can do that too. We can do that right here at our housing center in Springfield at 1780 Main Street. And you can make an appointment. So it's not about waiting in line. You can make an appointment, come in, go to a large conference room and be socially distanced, but get supported in completing your application. We can also do that in Northampton or Holyoke if folks were coming from other communities and needed that help there. For Wayfinders, again, we're a regional organization. So we are with these resources, we're supporting not only residents of Springfield, but Hampden County overall and Hampshire County as well. Additional information, again, can be found on our website, which is listed there, wayfinders.org. If you go to our homepage on our website, you click on the banner on the top of the page, it'll bring you right to the COVID financial assistance funds that we have, and the application is right there, and you can begin filling it out. One of the things that I did want to mention as well, and one of my colleagues here on today's call is going to go into greater depth on this, but I'll just say that there, in addition to the financial resources that I just talked about, there is, while the state's eviction moratorium has expired, there is a national CDC eviction moratorium. There are some particular wrinkles to that, which I'll let my legal aid colleague talk about more explicitly. But but I do want to say it's important during the time period of this, while this CDC residential eviction moratorium is in place, that people avail themselves of it at the same time that they're applying for resources. It'll be a critical key to inform and declare to your landlord. It's something you have to affirmatively do. It's a different situation than the previous moratorium that the state had. That actually requires action from the tenant, and I'm sure my legal aid colleague will talk more about it. Before going on to anything else, I did want to talk about a few other things that I don't have slides for, but I just wanted to talk through with folks about other resources that are available. First of all, again, if you need housing assistance of any kind, whether it's emergency rental and mortgage assistance, or you need foreclosure counseling, please give us a call at that 1600 number, or you can go to our website and find some resources there. We are here to help people with all different types of housing needs. So if you find yourself facing foreclosure, if you find yourself worried about paying your rent, if you find yourself concerned about any housing issue, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We have trained housing counselors and housing consumer education counselors who can help people navigate the resources available, not only through Wayfinders, but in the community overall, throughout the region and throughout the state if needed. One of the things I wanted to mention, in addition to what I talked about in terms of the RAFT and IRMA programs, the Eviction Diversion Initiative also expanded other programs. So it expanded our ability to provide that kind of referral and consultation around housing and consumer education centers, so that folks, there's no wrong front door when you come to Wayfinders. We want to help you navigate along the way. And so we're not going to put it on you to kind of figure it out. We're going to sit down with you and work with you to find the right programs and resources to support you. Another thing that was expanded and is continuing to expand, some of the programs that were announced during the Eviction Diversion Initiative when it was launched are being built at the same time that they were announced. So but some of them are existing. So Home Base program to a rapid rehousing program is an existing program that's been expanded. There are some other rapid rehousing programs that the state is beginning to roll out, some of which harken back to old programs that were used, for example, for folks who came to the region from Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria. To find a rapid rehousing program there is being developed right now and should be rolled out in December. That's going to provide people with similar supports to Home Base, but at a lower benefit level. There is also the Tenancy Preservation Program, otherwise known as TPP. And that program previously just targeted families who had with a member who had a disability. It's now being expanded to include households for frail seniors, so that more people can benefit from that program, so that they do not get displaced from their housing. There are, in all of these programs, the expansion includes the desire to be more flexible, to provide more efficient service. But I will say that there is since the eviction moratorium, just from our perspective, has ended, there has been a huge increase in the phone calls that come to our agency and in the applications that we receive. At the same time that that's happening, we are also continuing to staff up to meet that need. So there is kind of a growing volume, but we're also growing our capacity. And over the next couple of weeks, I expect that capacity to be at a place where we will continue to be able to accept the increasing volume that's going through the system right now to help people as soon as we can. But just know that the first step for you is to contact us. We'll help you navigate through the process. We want you to be sure to avail yourself of the resources that are available and make sure that you get those resources in as timely a manner as we're able to do. And we look forward to the conversation today and talking with the panelists and the counselor here if there are any questions for Wayfinders or about anything we do.
Keith, thank you so much. And I guess one of the things I'd be curious to hear more about is you mentioned that a lot of the programs that were announced after the moratorium expired are sort of being put together at the same time as they were announced. So I'm wondering if you can share some information for individuals who might be getting in contact with Wayfinders or any of our community service organizations as to the timeline. How long do you think it will take somebody who reaches out to actually be able to receive, the aid that they need to hopefully avoid any type of homelessness or eviction?
So from a counseling perspective and engagement, you're going to get that service right when you call us. So that's going to be something that's going to be made available to you right away. Depending on the program, there are different timelines. With the RAF program right now, we're experiencing a huge amount of volume where we just hired a bunch of folks. We're training them right now to begin to kind of reduce our wait times for that, but we try to get those assigned as quickly as possible. And we're trying to get down to from a completed application to resources, we're trying to get down to a 1 to 2 week period. Right now, it's longer than that because of the great volume that we're receiving. But at the same time, we are working to add more staff to our agency. One of the other things that we're working on is some goals around simplifying the program. Folks who will come to us will see that if they go through the online application, there are 17 steps. So there's a lot to it. There is documentation that's required. All of it that's there is required anywhere you go in the state to get RAF. This is not something that Wayfinders has put in place, but this is something that we're required to do by DHCD right now. So we are looking, and we have been advocating to reduce some of the documentation, streamline the process. But it is a challenge. It is a challenge for some folks to complete. It is a challenge to get through some of the documentation at times because of depending on the number of people in your household, the more documentation you may need. So it is my hope that we get to kind of a more efficient and streamlined process, both in terms of our wait times within Wayfinders, reduce that over the next several weeks, so we can get down to that more of that 2 week to a week time frame. But right now, there are longer wait times than that right now because of the tremendous volume, and the volume really ticked up before the eviction moratorium expired, but it's really exploded since that period of time in terms of the volume that comes into our agency. And we're working with several other organizations to also expand capacity. We were just meeting, in fact, with Springfield Partners, Valley Opportunity Council, and the Pioneer Valley CAP agency to talk about how we can work together on getting good applications completed, and they can support people as well. So we're trying to open up other channels as well to get people support in filling out applications so they can complete them. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And I think, my final question would be, relative to the work that we do as local officials and as advocates for our constituents. You mentioned one piece being, the level of documentation that the state is requiring, but I would just be curious if you'd like to share any other thoughts on what we can be doing in local government or as advocates towards state government to make that process more efficient and allow you guys to be able to serve, more individuals on a shorter timeline.
Yeah, I think, there are a few things within the program that we are again, documentation is a piece of it. There are requirements right now around folks being able to demonstrate sustainability, meaning that they'll be able to maintain their housing. Now, we know in the programs where this program was designed for a family who was experiencing a crisis in an acute moment. And so, but right now the entire economy is in crisis, right? So the idea of asking folks to think about sustainability at this time, we think is too much to ask, but we're required to do that at this point. The state, so things like that, getting things like that's an extra step that you have to do in the application. Now you have to ask people how you're going to do this and come up with a plan for folks before you can move forward to getting them funded. I will say one other thing that's important to understand about the program is it is a tenant-driven program. The tenant initiates the application. but landlords are involved. There is a landlord piece to it as well. So, and so we encourage landlords to become aware of the program and encourage their tenants to be involved. There is a part of I didn't mention this before, but there's an expansion of RAF that is occurring in the next several weeks that will allow smaller scale landlords to apply, but they will need their tenants' consent to do it. And so it's, when I say smaller scale, that landlord can only own up to 20 units of housing to be able to apply. But much of our affordable housing, actually non-subsidized affordable housing, is really through small landlords who don't have subsidies in their buildings, and many more people are affected today who may not have been affected in the past. So we're hopeful that will provide another channel to help people get applications completed, and that folks will be able to, more people will be able to benefit from that.
And in terms, Keith, of landlords versus tenants that might be applying, is there a difference in terms of who they should be contacting at Wayfinders?
No, there is no difference. There is, in terms of the RAF program, the landlord door is not quite open yet. So let me just be clear: the landlord door is not open. Landlords should not call and try to apply. It's a tenant-driven program, and even when landlords begin that process, they will need to get the tenant's consent to be able to do it. There will be a separate portal for the landlords to work through. That is not ready to go, but that is something that is coming. So that's one of the things that is being developed right now. So that's an important thing. Landlords get contacted once a tenant completes their application, identifies their landlord, and then the landlord has an application piece to complete. So that's how the process works.
Keith, thank you so much. And again, welcome to Wayfinders. Welcome to Springfield in your new role as Executive Director. We really appreciate you joining us. We're going to move on to our next panelist now. But we appreciate all the information you've been able to provide. And of course, we'll be making all that information available in various different ways as well, those links and phone numbers as well, both on our website. And then also this video, of course, will be available for playback afterwards for individuals who want to come back and look at those slides as well. So our next panelist is Rose Webster Smith. Rose is the lead community organizer at Springfield No One Leaves, which is a member-led community organization that works to organize residents who have been directly impacted by the housing crisis. Rose, thank you so much for joining us again. Rose was also present on one of our first town halls that we did at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're glad to have you back. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Springfield No One Leaves does?
Sure. So as Jesse said, my name is Rose Webster Smith. I am the program coordinator. I've stepped up from lead organizer, having multiple campaigns now. So a little of what we do is organize tenants to form tenant unions. And we also organize homeowners who are facing foreclosure. So we do open up our office for people who need to apply for RAFT. We've done many applications, whether it's a homeowner or a tenant, especially for the elderly who are not so tech savvy and are struggling in this new moment that we're in, where most of the regionals are operating from an online portal and not necessarily in person. So like we'll be out in the Berkshires, who has the worst internet in the state, doing some workshops with people out there to help them navigate the RAF process at places that actually have broadband. Many people know that the Berkshires still have a lot of dial-up. So it's almost impossible to do uploading of documents when you're on dial-up. We also, our biggest campaign is probably our which is what we were born from, was the foreclosure crisis. So we assist homeowners with their modification packets. I myself went through foreclosure and fought an eviction for 6 years. So I know the formula that the banks are using when you're filling out the modification. And we do a lot of education around the difference between a forbearance and a deferment. So a lot of people don't understand that the moratorium required a deferment. And when their bank didn't give them the deferment, the very first thing they should do is call the Attorney General's office. And even now, if you have a Fannie Mae, a Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, and a USDA loan, those all require deferments. But you have to be very specific, and the banks will tell you that forbearance and deferment are interchangeable. They really are not. They're two different things. One is a lump sum payment or a higher payment, and one is a program where they move all the missed payments to the end of your loan and you are considered current. And the reason I say that that's very important is for anybody who is in forbearance, while you do have permission to miss your payments, the bank considers you in default. So if you do not make your first higher payment or that lump sum payment, you will get put directly into the foreclosure pipeline. So there is a very, very big difference. The other part of what we do is we are outreaching to tenants who have and homeowners post foreclosure who have eviction cases in housing court. The tenants are getting a mailing from us with the CDC affidavit. I'm only going to touch that much on it because I know Community Legal Aid and Josh is going to get more into depth on that. You can call us, you can text us. We will also assist you with your Zoom hearing for court. It is never a good thing to invite the court into your home when you are doing, this new virtual thing. So we will, if you contact us, you have a hearing coming up, we will open up our office so that you can conduct your hearing in a nice, quiet locale that's not inviting the court into your home. And the reason why that's very important is just for the simple fact, like, yes, marijuana is legal here, but if there's a term in your lease that says no drug use and it's, a federal subsidy or whatever, and you're talking about bad conditions and the judge says, hey, I want to look at the sink that you're telling me is clogged, and you pass over drug paraphernalia. Now the court has all seen that, and that opens up a whole nother world of problems that you do not want to be involved with. So do not invite the court. If you are tech savvy, put a virtual background on. The court does not need to see what's going on within your home. So we've been mainly focusing on organizing tenants, again, helping with the raft, but I also want to talk a little bit about the eviction diversion initiative so that people understand that the majority of those programs are in name only right now. Right to counsel is months from being out. They've got, I think, 18,000, interviews and stuff that they need to do to even just hire. And the backlog with our regionals, we know is up there across the state, somewhere around 26,000 of a backlog of applications across the state. I'm not saying here in Springfield. But there is a humongous back log, so that we're trying to assist tenants to teach them to keep a log and log every time they're calling their case manager. It benefits you when if you're in an eviction case and it's not a sustainable tenancy. Make a log of your housing search. The judge is going to want to see those type of things. So there's a lot of education that goes into this work in organizing the community. But again, the majority of the Governor Baker's eviction initiative is in name only. And the Tenancy Preservation Project, just so everybody's clear, can only assist tenants. They cannot assist homeowners post foreclosure. And, we know that in Hampden County, the very first 2 days of the moratorium was lifted, 120 notices to quit were served by the sheriffs, which is a high enough number where, the sheriff reached out and we actually had a conversation of what that looks like in the community. The one thing I will say to tenants, if you are having an issue paying your rent, do not stick your head in the sand. Like, this is a very real thing. It is not a defense right now to walk into court and say, oh, well, my job shut down. While the judge is, of course, going to have empathy for you, it's not an actual defense. And the housing court is set up to process cases. They are set to adjudicate cases. They are neutral. It is an eviction machine, and they are there just to pump you through the system. So do not, reach out to Wayfinders, reach out to Springfield No One Leaves, reach out to Community Legal Aid, reach out to Arise for Social Justice, Springfield Partners. Springfield Partners is another advocacy group pre-COVID that was in the housing court along with us and Wayfinders. So they're still there. For those, I know there's many in the community that are worried about the utility shutoff that expires November 15th. If you're finding that you're not paying the utilities so that you can pay your rent, reach out to Wayfinders, reach out to Springfield Partners. Those are programs within the community that are there to assist you. And then organize, call Springfield No One Leaves, call Arise. That's what we do. We organize, and call your legislators. Tell them what is happening to you. We have a bill called the Housing Stability Act, which will stabilize housing for a year. Reach out to us. We're happy to tell you what's involved with that. But start utilizing your elected officials. You elected them. You are their constituent. It is their job to represent you. And if you're not reaching out to them, then they're not knowing that you're having a problem. And the more people that are calling their legislators to say, hey, this eviction diversion initiative isn't working, then the more it signals to them they need to do something else. So that was a whole mouthful that I just slammed into 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop there.
Rose, that was all really important information, and I'm really grateful to you for being on the panel today and for all the work that Springfield No One Leaves does. I've had the opportunity to attend a number of events that Springfield No One Leaves has put on, and to speak and advocate for members of Springfield No One Leaves, homeowners who have had their homes saved because somebody was able to guide them through what they needed to do. And those are some of the memories that I hold, really near and dear, since my election and before it. So we appreciate all of the work that you guys do. I did have a few questions for you, but you sort of answered them all. I guess I would pose the same question to you that I posed to Keith relative to what we can do in local government right now, what we should be advocating for at the state level. You mentioned, I know, the Housing Stability Act. Is there anything else that you think we should really be making more noise about to advocate for the individuals who you're working with?
So I think understanding that, like I said, I faced an eviction for 6 years. It wasn't something that I necessarily want to talk about. But, city councilors have a different relationship. They're more accessible. So sometimes being that voice for your constituent who doesn't feel comfortable reaching out to their state rep is important, and sending the letters on behalf of the city council or mayors signing on to letters to say, hey, this is what my constituents are saying are happening to them on the ground. How can we all work together to protect people's housing, right? Because we know even when the state of emergency lifts in the state, there's still going to be a recovery. Jobs are not just going to immediately come back. We need bold leadership now so that we can recover from this. Otherwise, we are looking at, a displacement crisis on level with the Great Depression. Never mind the foreclosure crisis. I mean, the Great Depression. You have tenants that are facing eviction, homeowners that are going to be facing foreclosure, small landlords losing their properties, small mom and pops that, your elderly grandmother who, just has a 2-family house. She occupies one side and rents to another, who are struggling. And these are all people who are facing housing instability right now because of this global pandemic that we are all in. And we need all of our legislators, whether that's city council, all the way up to the governor, to be actually doing bold legislative action to protect the people of the Commonwealth.
Rose, thank you so much. And I did have one question for you. I know we spoke a little bit about homeowners and a lot of the rental programs a lot of the rental assistance programs that we talked about with the last panelists were relative to tenants. In terms of homeowners that might be reaching out to their banks looking for deferment versus forbearance, are the banks still under any obligation to provide that?
So if they are a federally backed mortgage like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, if you have questions, reach out to us, because in Massachusetts, they are allowed to separate the note and the mortgage. So one person could hold your note and you could pay a totally different party. So you'll have no idea that in all actuality, everything is owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Reach out to us. We can look that up and help advocate to get you that deferment. And if they're not cooperating, always utilize the Attorney General's home court program. File a formal complaint with the Consumer Debt Relief, I think it is, and utilize your AG's office. They are really good at holding banks accountable. That's one thing they did learn from the foreclosure crisis.
And Rose, what is the number and email that people can contact Springfield No One Leaves at? So
you can call or text us at 413-342-1804, or you can email us at info@springfieldnooneleaves.org, or you can message us on Facebook at Springfield No One Leaves or Springfield NOL, and someone will respond back to your inquiry. Just like Wayfinders, we're having a very large influx of calls, but we will return your call. It may not be the day that you called, but it'll probably be the next day.
Well, thank you so much, Rose. And also to Rose's point, I think it's important for folks that are watching at home to know that not only myself, but also many of my colleagues on the City Council, we are in regular communication with folks like Rose, and it really have had the opportunity throughout the pandemic. We were one of the first elected bodies to reach out in favor of the eviction and foreclosure moratorium. We had a letter signed by almost every city councilor seeking that. We also were one of the city councils to pass a right to counsel resolution that I introduced a couple of months before the pandemic. We had no idea what we were in for. And so, we really rely on these community organizations to be able to bring forward what the situation is on the ground. And, to your point about us serving as a voice for the constituents, I think I say all the time, the city council is really the closest elected body to the people. We are elected officials, but we're also your neighbors. We are, we work in academia. We have lawyers on the council. We have folks working in property management. We have teachers. We have accountants, right? So we all, spend a lot of time in the community in a bit of a different way, I think, than other elected officials do, just by the nature of the job. And so we're certainly here for folks and continue to provide those constituent services. And we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the panel. We're going to move on to our next panelist now. Our next panelist is attorney Josh Gutierrez. Josh is a staff attorney with Community Legal Aid, which is a free civil legal aid provider for residents in Western and Central Massachusetts. Among other things, CLA specializes in assisting tenants threatened with eviction. And so, Josh, thank you so much for joining us, Attorney Gutierrez, and we'd invite you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what Community Legal Aid does.
Thank you so much, Councilor Litterman, for having me here with you all this evening. Since you've already explained who we are, I can move on to what it is that we do. As you mentioned, we represent tenants in eviction and subsidy termination cases. That's one of our biggest areas of work. That's primarily what I'm here to talk about this evening. However, I do want to point out that we do several other things, many other things as well. We help homeless families attempting to access shelter, individuals and families attempting to access unemployment and public benefits, which is a huge area right now. Students in need of services to help them thrive in school, victims of domestic violence in divorce and child custody cases, and many, many other things. Oh, as folks have mentioned this evening, as we've traditionally done quite a bit of housing work, we're gearing up to do quite a bit more. As the moratorium has ended, the governor and the legislature have allocated significant resources for, as Mr. Ferry mentioned, rental assistance and also for legal assistance. So we're in the process of hiring, I myself am on the hiring committee, hiring attorneys to do eviction defense work and particularly COVID-related defense work. We will also be hiring paralegals and case managers. And part of what these folks will be doing will also be to assist tenants in going through and completing the RAF process, which, as folks have mentioned, is very detailed. There's a lot of information that's required. Again, not all that comes from Wayfinders and its brother and sister organizations, but a lot of it originates at the DHCD level. Historically, it's been quite difficult at times for tenants to access RAF funds. You know, it's a multi-step process, and depending on their situation, they may not have access to certain documents that are required. So there are many, many challenges there, and we're hopeful that the case managers will be able to work hand in hand with Wayfinders and provide solutions to the best of everyone's mutual ability. Back to a little bit more about community legal aid and the work that we do. I want to point out, you know, we'll be going over a bunch of information this evening. I have a PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint, but I've caved and I've prepared a PowerPoint because I have a lot of information that I just want folks to be able to see. And thank you, Counselor, for offering to take that information and make it available to folks so that they can look at it afterward. I think that'll be very helpful for people to have as a reference. I want to point out, you know, a lot of this information is going to address some basic questions that folks have, and we don't operate as a hotline, so we're not set up to just have folks call us and answer general questions. Another thing that limits us is we don't represent landlords. I know there's a lot of questions about resources for landlords that are out there. So I'm going to put up some of this stuff, and again, this is partly to address a lot of the questions that we've been getting, because folks have been calling in and they've been asking these things, and a lot of this isn't primarily what we do, but I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to get some of this information out there.
And that'll be great, Attorney Gutierrez, too, because it gives us an idea of the types of questions you guys are getting, what the situation is on the ground as well.
Exactly. So we'll bounce around in our PowerPoint here. So this is our information here. How do you contact us? You can contact us online, www.communitylegal.org. Here's our phone number. So if you have a legal problem, this is great. The Mass Legal Resource Finder. It's almost interactive. You can go on there. You can fill out, what type of issue is it that you're having, and sort of drill down into that. And the results it'll give you will be tailored to your issue and your geographic area. So if you're wondering, Josh Gutierrez just rattled off this list of things that CLA does. Is my issue a thing that CLA might be able to help me with? Well, this will tell you if it's something that might be in our wheelhouse or not. And if it is, we'll show up. And if not, you may be directed to other resources. Also, to the extent that folks have questions about housing law and other areas, masslegalhelp.org is one of my favorite resources. It's specifically designed for lay people to get information about legal issues. Covers quite a few things. One pro tip, go digging around. The information is, there's so much there that you kind of have to click through all the links to keep finding the good stuff. If you don't click around, you'll miss things. So landlords, what if I'm a landlord? There's a Hampden County Bar Association legal clinic. You can call them, you can leave them a message, and they'll call you back. There's also the Mass Legal Answers online, masslao.org. You can go in there, you can type in, you can enter your question, and volunteer lawyers go in and check, see what questions have been submitted. And if it's something that's that they're able to answer, they will answer it for you. And important note, these resources aren't limited to landlords. They're available to tenants as well, and they may also be able to help you with questions that are not necessarily housing related. A couple of other main themes to talk about this evening. We can talk about the CDC moratorium and what protections might be available to tenants. Another thing I'd like to address is what the eviction process looks like, and how, one, in terms of notices, how a tenant knows, you know, I think my landlord's trying to evict me. How do I know? What does that process look like? What are the steps? And also what happens at housing court. So if you have any preference, counselors, in terms of where I start, I'm happy to oblige.
Let's start, Attorney Gutierrez, with the CDC moratorium, because I think that's probably
Absolutely.
one of the most pressing pieces, and I know a couple of other speakers have mentioned it, so I think it's very important for people to understand how that differs from the state moratorium that was in place and what people need to do in order to avail themselves of that protection.
Absolutely. And that's one of the main areas of questioning we've been getting. First of all, there were a couple of different protections, right? There's the Federal CARES Act, excuse me, that's basically moot at this point. It's essentially expired. There's some of us attorneys, both on the tenant side and the landlord side, having some arguments about back and forth about, you know, whether it requires a notice of a certain length, but that's fun stuff for lawyers. It doesn't really mean much to, you know, regular people, and it doesn't really do that much for regular people other than potentially give you that much more time before a landlord files a court case, if it even applies to you. The Massachusetts, the state moratorium, as everybody knows, just expired. So the CDC moratorium, which went into effect a little bit earlier, actually took effect in Massachusetts October 18th. And what does it do? The first thing to understand right now, it's temporary, okay? But as we've all discussed, it takes time to get assistance for rental arrears, and people are going to need all the time that they can get. And so if it applies to you, it's absolutely to your advantage to submit a CDC declaration. So what does it do? It prevents eviction in cases where a tenant owes rent due to illness or income loss. And the protection is only until December 31st, 2020. But again, it's better than nothing. It's going to give you a little bit more time. Now, the courts are still hearing these eviction cases, but if you're a tenant and the CDC protections apply to you, the court is not going to allow a physical eviction until after December 31st, 2020. As far as eligibility, I'm not sure if I need to go into all of this in great detail. I will say that this slide is very, very helpful. I'm going to leave it up on the screen for a little minute here while I'm talking, and counselor will make this available to folks after the presentation. Also, don't worry. Next question. Let's talk about how to avail yourself of these protections. There's a guided, fillable CDC declaration form that's available. The Suffolk University has put this together. Again, this will be available afterwards. So folks will have the link. And you can go there, it'll ask you a series of questions and it'll help you determine whether or not the CDC moratorium applies to you. And if it does, you'll be able right then and there to create and print off a form, which you can then submit. You need to submit it to your landlord, not to the court. It would, once there's a court case, make sense to let the court know that you think the CDC moratorium applies to you. But in order legally to have it apply, right, in addition to meeting all the requirements, you have to have this declaration and you have to submit it to your landlord. While you could submit it, you know, after the court case is filed, theoretically, you know, it makes sense to do it as soon as you can. Do it as soon as possible. That certainly would be our recommendation. Unless, Counselor, do you have any other specific questions on the moratorium, or do you want me to talk a little bit more about the court process, other subjects? I just want to make sure before I move on.
No, I think that's okay, Attorney Gutierrez. Yes, we can move on to the other pieces, and we'll make that information on the CDC moratorium available via our website following the town hall tonight.
Excellent. So here we can talk a little bit about the eviction process. This is another, you know, frequently asked questions, right? We hear a lot from tenants who, you know, are hearing from their landlord orally that their landlord wants them to leave. My landlord says I have to leave. Do I have to leave? You do not have to leave until a court orders you to leave. The first step in the process is a notice to quit. It's a letter, typically from the landlord or the landlord's attorney, but that's all it is. It's a letter. And it states the reasons for the eviction. It doesn't require you to leave. All it means is that if you're not out by the time period that's set in the notice, that then your landlord is going to file or would be able to file an eviction case against you. Might be delivered by the sheriff or constable, might come in the mail. Depends, you know, neither's required. The summons is the next step. This is a court form. This one's almost always delivered by a sheriff or constable. I'm not sure I've ever seen one that wasn't. But you know, that's a telltale sign, right? Sheriff or constable shows up with a very official looking court form. The summons used to, pre-COVID, tell you when you needed to be in court and where. Now, the summons, it's not going to list the date and time of the initial hearing. You'll get a separate notice of the Zoom hearing. The housing court right now is basically doing everything by Zoom, with rare exceptions. People basically have to make, you know, requests and say, you know, I can't, you know, for various reasons. You know, for example, I have a colleague who, you know, managed to get an in-person hearing, but that tends to be a pretty rare thing these days. So this comes separately in the mail. This is another concern and challenge that we all know there have been some delays in the mail. And so we will see whether folks get these timely or not. And we're hoping that people will. Tenants should read this very, very carefully because this contains the date and time for the first court event, and it contains the Zoom phone call-in information. So what do you do when you get that summons? You want to respond to it. You want to file an answer and discovery requests. The answer is a document that tells the court who you are, that you're participating in the action, and what your defenses or counterclaims might be. Discovery requests, that allows you to ask the landlord for information about why they're evicting you and what proof that they have. If it's a non-payment case, you might request the ledger, for example. If it's a cause case, you might request, you know, who are your witnesses? What are they going to say when they show up to court? And then In other parts of the state, my colleagues statewide really suggest requesting a jury trial. Out here in Western Massachusetts, I tend to advise people not to do that, particularly if things really go south and you end up having to do the trial yourself. Doing it in front of a jury is a totally different ballgame than being in front of our judges out here in Western Mass. I'm putting it in here simply to say that you have a right to a jury trial, but again, my advice by and large, and again, I'm saying this is typically what I tell people. I want to be cautious here because there are some cases where, for example, there'll be an attorney and the attorney will tell you for reasons that are known to that attorney and that are specific to your case that it makes sense to do it. By all means, take their advice. Take their advice if they're going to try it. If they're going to try it. Rose is making face, but I know there are attorneys that do it for good reasons. But by and large, in the cases that we see, I tend to say not to do it. But in any event, it's your right, and you can request it if you want it. The deadline to do these things is 3 days before the initial court date. Now, again, this gets a little complicated because what is the initial court date? You don't know until you get that Zoom notice, right? This is another issue. Josh, what are these documents? I've never heard of this before. What is it? How do I even prepare this? Rose mentioned MAID. It's another legal tool I think the folks at Suffolk were involved in creating. There's this guided interview again, and very simple. You go, you ask, it asks you a series of questions. You put in the answers, and it prepares these documents for you. It helps you figure out what your defenses or counterclaims might be. And at any point, so right now, we've always had tremendous demand for legal services. This has been a thing prior to COVID, and there's so many people out there who need legal assistance, free legal assistance, and we try to help as many people as we can, but the supply has always exceeded the demand. So right now we're open at that notice to quit stage. People can call us. The hope is, especially in some of these non-payment cases, that as we start gearing up, that we will be able to start assisting folks with the raft applications and with their cases. We, like everybody else right now, we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have and trying to ramp up as quickly as possible and put these things into place. So yeah, apply basically as soon as you can. Contact Wayfinders for rental assistance. Contact us. You can apply by phone or on our website. Now, once the case actually starts up in housing court, as I said, all these hearings are being conducted by Zoom. If the tenant doesn't have access to Zoom, you can use the telephone. That information is also provided on that Zoom notice. Extenuating circumstances, if you can make an argument that you need to have a case, you need to have your case heard in person, the court may do that. But we're all, I think the courts, legal aid attorneys, tenants, I think we're all in the process of figuring out what those circumstances are going to look like. I'm anticipating the question, when and how, and I don't know the answer yet. Like so many things COVID related, we're all working through this and we're all going to find out together. Now the initial court date, it used to be a hearing day, right? The court used to basically, if you couldn't resolve the case that day, they would try and have a hearing that day. Now, one of the nice things is that the initial court date is basically a status or mediation. So one of the court mediators will ask the parties, are you willing to mediate? which is basically, are you willing to talk about some sort of a resolution to this case, short of going in front of the judge where maybe nobody gets what they want. So if they're willing, then with the assistance of the mediator, they'll attempt to work out an agreement right then. General advice, ask questions. Perfectly fine to ask questions about why you're there, about what you can do, about all these things. Try not to volunteer too much information. And this is the big one. Do not agree to anything you are not 100% sure you can do. 100% sure. I cannot tell you how many times people call us and they say, I signed this agreement. It says I have to move out, but now I can't do that. Can you help me? And the answer is typically a much more unfortunate one than it is if people, contact us before they sign the agreement. Same thing with, I think I can pay X amount, but, or maybe in good faith you believe that you can, but you weren't quite cautious enough to prepare for the possible future in which you can't, right? So this one, cannot emphasize it enough. If you're not 100% sure you can do it, don't agree to it. If the parties are not willing to mediate, if the landlord's like, nope, don't want to talk, or if they try it and they can't come to an agreement, then a trial will be scheduled, but that will be scheduled for a later date. Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm reasonably confident. My guess would be that the scheduling would happen right then and there. But it's possible that the court might say, okay, we'll contact you and we'll send you a notice of the trial date. That's a question you either have to ask the court or ask me later once we've seen what it is that they end up doing with those. In the housing court, there's a lawyer for the day program. Historically, we've always done that in person. It worked very well. Now with Zoom, we, legal aid, and frankly, I've talked with landlords' attorneys who are just banging their heads against the wall about Zoom and how to make some of these things work in ways that, that protect the interests of everyone's clients, landlords and tenants alike. So this is one of the things, as I said, there are a lot of things that we are all figuring out together. This is one of them. The court and legal aid are trying to figure out what is this going to look like? How are they going to make referrals? And we lawyers at Community Legal Aid, we're trying to figure out how we're going to staff this, how we're going to be present there in the court for people who need our help, and also be present for all the people who are calling us on the phone, and to be able to do all the work that we need to do outside of sitting in court and waiting for people who very much want to speak with us and who we very much want to help. We're trying to balance all of these things all at the same time. So other general advice for housing court, I'll say it again, don't agree to anything you're not 100% sure you can do. Also, ask for time to apply for wayfinders for RAF funding if you need it. Consider negotiating for a lower rent, waiver of past due rent. Another thing I want to pay special attention to here. All litigants, and that's tenants, landlords, others, have the right to a court interpreter. It's best, and it doesn't matter what your language is, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, Somali, whatever it is, the court will figure it out. It is their job to figure it out. It's best to ask for an interpreter at the earliest possible opportunity so that they can use their best efforts to line one up. Call the court ahead of time. This is the number for the clerk's office that I put up here. Also, tenants with disabilities may be entitled to a reasonable accommodation. Things off the top of my head that are major issues. If you have a hearing impairment, if you have a visual impairment, if for some reason, disability-related reason, you're unable to use Zoom, let the court know ahead of time if possible. If you forgot I said this and you show up at your Zoom and you realize that you have a disability that's making it difficult for you to access justice, say something, speak up. You may have a right to have an accommodation for your disability, but you need to make the court aware that is interfering with the process. And finally here, I won't spend too much time on all the fine print. Some of this is duplicative. I borrowed this from colleague Zoe Crumen. She did a great job, and there's a whole bunch of information there. Again, it's all in the PowerPoint. It'll all be available. Sorry, as I said, that's a lot of information. I know I spoke very quickly. I'll turn it back to you, Counselor, in case I missed anything, or if you have any specific questions about anything I haven't addressed.
No, Attorney Gutierrez, that was definitely all extraordinarily important information. And I think that it was, one of the pieces that will be key for people to understand is what their rights are, how they can avail themselves of their rights. And community legal aid is certainly going to be one of the most important pieces, I think, for people to be able to contact. So we appreciate you bringing all that information to us tonight. We're going to be able to include that again on our website following the panel. And, what we really want people to take away from this, if anything, is don't wait. Reach out to community legal aid, reach out to Wayfinders, to Springfield No One Leaves, to Springfield Partners, to Arise, and look for the help, whether you're a tenant, a homeowner, or even a landlord. As we've discussed, there are going to be resources open to all those people, but they aren't all there yet. And so in the meantime, we need to, A, be talking about that with our state officials, and B, still becoming familiar with what's going to be there and how we can utilize that to hopefully keep people in their homes. Josh, I'll ask you before we move on to our next panelist just quickly, if, and it's a little bit different, certainly working in the court system, but is there anything you think that, we at the local level or advocating at the state level could do to address maybe some issues that you're seeing in that process?
I think that one's a really difficult question for me to answer. And it's, frankly, because, in my role as an attorney working for a legal aid organization, I can't, lobby or advocate for any particular policies. It is my hope, however, that, in hearing from, and again, not just from me, but from your constituents, Counselor, from the other folks on this town hall this evening, and all the other stakeholders involved, that folks will hopefully get a sense of what some of these roadblocks are, and then work to implement, on appropriate policies on the policy side. Again, our role is basically just, as I said, working together with, with Wayfinders, with the court, with community partners, and representing our clients to the best of our ability, and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that the system works as smoothly as possible.
Well, thank you so much, Attorney Gutierrez. We certainly appreciate all the information that you shared and that insight as well. And with that, we are going to move on to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Liz Busey. Liz is the housing organizer at Arise for Social Justice, a grassroots and member-led community organization that has been organizing and advocating in Springfield for more than 30 years on many issues, but including housing rights and assisting many individuals who come to them seeking guidance regarding all of these different things that we're here today. And so we appreciate you, Liz, for being with us and for all that you've done and have been doing. And I know that, Arise certainly helps with a lot of the things that many of our previous panelists have talked about. So you're welcome to touch again upon any of those pieces. But I'd also be curious in hearing from you, especially because I have witnessed firsthand the one-on-one work that you do so often with families and individuals, in hearing about throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially now with the eviction foreclosure moratorium having expired at the state level, what the situation on the ground is looking like, and what types of scenarios, questions, and situations you're seeing at Arise.
Hi, excuse me. Thank you, Jesse. One of the things that Arise is known for is we're sort of like the last place people go when they've fallen through the cracks. So we use a lot of duct tape to try and keep people from falling through the cracks. So we deal with folks that don't fit neatly into any of the other categories that can get help. Everybody knows somebody who had to have their electricity in somebody else's name. Well, it means that they're not eligible for fuel assistance or other services. We try and help people figure out a way around that. We help families that have been turned down by DHCD for shelter, trying to figure out a way that they are eligible. So we do a lot of work with people that are at their wits' end, and sometimes we don't have anything to offer them in help except a shoulder. And for some people, that's what they need. During COVID, we've done a lot of different things. We opened our office back up again the beginning of July, and we've been doing homeless packages and food bags and some utility payments for folks. But we didn't limit it to gas and electric. We paid car insurance for people because we all know they're going to keep on driving even if they don't have adequate insurance. But if they get stopped, it opens a whole nother can of worms. So sometimes it's just the little things that we can do, but we do a lot of referring to other agencies and organizations, help people figure out what they need and where they can go to get it. And sometimes we'll throw a picket up if we have to. So we do all sorts of things like that, as well as do legislative work. We're working with Homes for All on the stability bill. I've worked with Maple on the Ultra bill that's happening. So there's a lot of things we do, but I wouldn't say it's just limited to housing by any means. I've worked with landlords that need to evict somebody, and it's a righteous eviction, but they have no idea what to do, and there's no place for them to go to get help. We help people find a way to make ends meet. We all know that sometimes you babysit for somebody, but you don't claim the money, and that's what's keeping you in your apartment. But you can't count on that when it comes time to apply for benefits. So we try and make sure that the people that have the least don't get left out in the cold. Ask me something, maybe I can help.
I think that that's the key, Liz. I think, Arise has long served as a catch-all organization in the city of Springfield. I think, all the way from the storefront office on State Street to your new location on School Street, and so we wanted to make sure that Arise was represented on the panel today. And I think that, what you said about, kind of being the last stop when you need that extra that extra help in understanding the process and that flexibility, I think is really important. And I think, I'd still be, if you wanted to go on, I'd be interested in hearing about, not of course by name or anything, but just in general, maybe some of the challenges that you're seeing people face. Who's coming into Arise, these days right now and asking for help, and what is it that they're looking for? Because I think that tells us a lot about what is going on in the community in a way that we might not, necessarily hear about otherwise.
Well, we see a lot of non-traditional tenants. What I mean by that is grandma's sleeping on the couch because she can't go anywhere else. And then she gets thrown out. There's nothing out there for her. And you're not going to send a 79-year-old woman to a shelter. It just doesn't work. So if we have the funds, we'll put her up in a motel until we can figure something else out. We've had folks come in, as I mentioned, the landlord whose family was coming home. He needed his place, but the guy wasn't going to leave and was behind almost 6 months in rent, even though he was getting unemployment benefits during COVID. He still didn't pay. We let people know that. I mean, there were rumors that you got $200 a week during COVID, way back when it first started, or that landlords could never charge you rent during COVID. These things we know weren't true. And so we got as much information out as we could to dispel some of the myths that were going around. Sometimes, like I said, we're just a shoulder to cry on. Other times, people will call us back and say, I did it. I did it myself, which is a big piece because we don't want to do the work for you. We want you to be able to do the work for yourself. And in order to do that, you need somebody to lean on. And that's what we're here for. The only thing I would say is mediation in court doesn't work well. Only because the mediators and the landlords on some level know each other. And so when you're a tenant and you go in, and I'm not saying that the mediator would be dishonest or would be biased against the tenant, but when the mediator goes, hey, Joe, how's your kid? It puts the tenant at a disadvantage because they automatically think, well, that's it, I got to agree to everything. So we're always telling people the same thing. Don't agree to anything if you're not 100% positive that you can do it.
Excellent. Liz, if somebody's looking for that type of assistance, that guidance, or if they're hitting the walls elsewhere, how can they contact Arise?
Just give us a call and set up an appointment. Our door is locked, so it's appointment only. But even if they just walk up to the door and ring the bell, we'll still let them in.
What's the number, Liz?
413-734-4948. Same number for 35 years.
Liz, we appreciate you and everything that Arise does. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And with that, we are going to move to our next panelist and our final panelist for the evening, and that is Cynthia Scott Mitchell. We saved the best for last, Ms. Mitchell. She is the Director of Community Services for Springfield Partners for Community Action. And Springfield Partners is the designated community action agency for Springfield. I know, Ms. Cynthia, that Springfield Partners, as has been mentioned, is certainly doing a lot of similar work to these other organizations, but can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like? And also, I know you guys also have some funds available in other areas as well. So we'd invite you to introduce yourself and share that information with the panel and the folks watching at home at this time. Oh, Ms. Cynthia, you're muted. I'm going to unmute you. And you'll just want to unmute. I've unmuted you, but you'll want to hit the unmute button on your screen as well. There you go. And we'll invite you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia Scott Mitchell. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I'm doing a telephone commercial. And by the way, that's Cynthia with an S. Jesse, thank you for inviting me. And panelists, great information. And I do want to acknowledge one thing about Arise. Arise has been a fortress in the community, the city of Springfield, for over 30 years, as Jesse mentioned. I had the pleasure of starting off my community organizing work, working with Arise. I actually served as a 2-term president there. So I go way back with them, and I am very proud of the work that they've done and continue to do. So Springfield Partners, as Jesse mentioned, is the designated community action agency for the city of Springfield. Our mission is to serve the poor and low-income communities. For some of you that don't know, Community Action was founded in 1964 under the Economic Opportunity Act as an anti-poverty agency. So we've been around in the city of Springfield for about 56 years. We've done tremendous work and continue to do tremendous work. Some of the programs that we have, and Jesse, you're correct, we also do a lot of the similar work that some of the other organizations do. However, we do have some unique programs that we also offer to folks. As you know, we have an early education care center, child care center. We also do offer the weatherization services to residents of the city of Springfield. We have a volunteer income tax program where we prepare your taxes free. So you can save that money that you would be normally paying to H&R Block or any of those fee places. So, and we serve about 2,000 taxpayers a year. Income guidelines do apply, but we also work very hard to make sure folks identify, recognize, and receive all of their tax credits, earned income tax credits. We also do a low income taxpayer clinic, which is unique to the area. It's the only one in Western Mass. We have a federal and a state one that works with folks that have controversy with their taxes. For instance, you receive a letter from IRS and said you had unreported incomes or a dependent wasn't right, and you receive a letter from them. You come to us and we have a lawyer, tax lawyer on site that work with you to work through that process. If he has to do an offer in compromise, he can do that. But 9 times out of 10, he's able to get the taxpayer not to have to pay a thing. But you know, once you get a letter from IRS or DOR, we put our head in the sand because we're afraid. So I really want people to know that we have that service available on the federal and the state level. So if you ever receive any kind of notice from any tax authority, whether it's federal or state, just call us. Unfortunately, we're not seeing clients in person right now, but we are working remotely. So we can either do GoToMeeting or Zoom interviews with folks, but we'll make it work. We also have, as I know Wayfinders does as well, we offer financial literacy and credit counseling. We again are doing those remotely. We can do in person. We work with folks to make sure they can get their credit straight. And that's one of the things I think is going to be some of the collateral damage post-COVID is people's credit scores are going to begin to suffer. So we're trying to get the word out to folks now. Come to us. We can work with you and help you get it done. Don't fall for those fee places that charge you a fee to do the same thing that we can work with you to get done on your own. You don't need to pay to have your credit worked on. We can do that for you. We also have a veterans program, which is huge. They provide transportation. Prior to COVID, they were doing weekly luncheons for veterans. They have clothing or clothing closets for folks, for veterans. They provide a lot of service for veterans. Right now, during the pandemic, they're still providing transportation to doctor's appointments, to shopping, and they're also providing food packages to the veterans. We have our, again, I said we had our credit counseling and financial literacy. Financial literacy is like group Zooms or group meetings. Our credit counseling is one-on-one counseling. And I just want to add this little piece here as the more I talk about credit counseling and look at the services that all of us provide, I often advocate that financial literacy and or credit counseling become an embedded part of all of these programs, because you can't build your foundation if you don't know how, where that next dollar is coming from or going. And I often use myself as an example. Every morning I would go to Dunkin' Donuts and get an extra large coffee. That's $2.75 a day. What I started doing was I took an empty Dunkin' Donut cup, put it in my coffee holder. Instead, I just dropped the money in there. So little ways that folks can kind of work on different things. You know, all of us, I do, have coins hanging around in my car. Well, now we know what to do with those coins. I have my grandbaby roll them and we take them to the bank. So little things that we can get folks to do that you're not even thinking about, which is very important for folks moving forward. And when we talk about eviction, we offer eviction counseling. Folks can call and get on phone counseling around eviction, what's going on with eviction, how to protect yourself against eviction. One of the things we always remind people, you owe the rent, pay something, whatever you can. Have a conversation with your landlord. My staff person is one of the people that are in housing court on the, it used to be Thursdays, and they're gearing up for the Zoom conferences now, but he's in court on Thursdays to help advocate for folks, but we're on the line with people prior to that, getting them prepared. This came about through Judge Fields, who had called a meeting between myself and my counselor, and his concern was that he saw a lot of tenants that had good cases, but they was losing by default because they didn't show up in court, because they wasn't sure what to do. So now they talk to us, my counsel, on the phone. A couple of days before the court date, we work with them with the answer, make copies for them, do what they need to do to have them prepared for court, and also encourage them to show up. Because when they look at it and see a familiar face, it makes it a little bit easier. And I agree with Liz, when you have mediators that have, that give the impression they have relationships with the landlord, it does something to the tenant. You kind of feel like, oh God, I don't have a chance. But if you look out and you see that familiar face, then it kind of helps folks go along. So I know one of the biggest things we wanted to talk about was what services we have available in addition to those, but to serve folks' immediate need, particularly around COVID. So we do have funds available. It's our COVID-19 emergency assistance response. And we have some different things in it. So we can assist folks with back electric bills up to $500. We can assist folks with grocery up to $200, gift cards that you get for the grocery store. We also do water and sewer because we found that was one thing that a lot of programs were not doing. So we offer our water and sewer bills up to $500. In addition, we also can offer folks funeral expenses when the death is COVID related. We offer, and that's up to $2,500. We also do back rent and back mortgage. And we offer hot water tanks. Those are things, particularly through our weatherization program, we found that folks was a lot in need of. So we offer that through our COVID money and the funeral expense as well as the water and sewer, something unique that not many places offer. Income guidelines do apply. Folks just need to call us at 413-263-6500 or go to our website, www.springfieldpartnersinc.com, and you can find all of the information. You can also contact us. Oh, one other thing I do want to talk about is in terms of taxes. Most of us might not know that people without a permanent address, homeless people, can still qualify for the economic impact payments, the stimulus money. We have a trained, certified tax person on site that can walk people through that. She actually spent a lot of time down at the Worthing Street shelter and actually got folks their stimulus money. We're still doing that. People again can call us at that number and we can get that information for them. There's a way if you just put $1 in the income or something that they can figure out how to get the, I don't know how it works, but it works. So if they want to call our VITA coordinator, she can get them hooked up on that and get them rolling with some stimulus funds. And I think that's it. If anybody have any other questions.
Ms. Cynthia, no, we appreciate you coming on and being able to share that information with us. We did know that Springfield Partners had some of those specific funds available. I was glad you're able to bring that information both to the panel and to the folks at home. And so with that, with our final panelist, we are going to move into our closing. I do appreciate the entire panel. I know we went a little over time, but we did want to make sure that we were able to provide as much information as possible to our community. And we also know that this is a very fluid situation. I want folks to rest assured that this information not only going out to our community, but is also going to be helpful for me as I talk with fellow colleagues in government and advocates as well about what we still need to be saying to our state delegation, to our governor, and to our federal legislators. We have a very important responsibility, and not just us as city councilors, but also as community members, to be reaching out and bringing this information about what is really going on in our communities to the higher levels of government. And that is a responsibility that we take very seriously. And so I do want to take the time again to thank all of our panelists tonight for joining us. I want to thank you for what you do every day to support our community, every single one of you in your own unique ways. And we hope that the information provided tonight will be helpful to our community. We encourage those who have tuned in again to share this information with your friends, with your family, with neighbors who may be in need of support during this time. Please do not be afraid to reach out and ask for help during this time. We're going to make this information available on our website, www.jesseforspringfield.com. Click on COVID-19 resources. We'll have all the slides there. We'll also have the contact information for each of these organizations. So please, we know that this is a difficult time, but we have to come together, reach out, and be able to bring these resources to our community members. I want to thank as well the team at Focus Springfield Community TV for their assistance and willingness to broadcast tonight's panel. Focus Springfield has truly been and remains the driving force that has allowed us to enable communication and really continuity of local government throughout this pandemic. Now, as we continue to come together as a community to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, I do want to remind folks watching at home that we do all need to do our part. Please continue to wear a mask, continue to socially distance. And if you feel sick or if you have been around somebody who has been feeling sick, please take advantage of the free COVID-19 community testing that is available. And know also that I remain available to provide constituent services. We encourage individuals to reach out directly to me, whether by phone or email. You can always reach me at 413-285-3041 or Jay Letterman at Springfield City Hall. My friends, it remains an honor and privilege to serve our city of Springfield. And through our collective efforts, I know that we will get through this together. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and have a good evening.